Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 51 of the Inking Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Rob Santos. I'm joined, as I always am, by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
And today, we are wrapping up our read of the 8th volume in Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time, Path of Daggers. So, Drew, the reins are yours, my man. Take it away. Tell us what's happened.
Sure. So, where we left off last time, Egwene had just gotten the Hall of the Tower to declare war on Elida, and she firmly took control of the Saladar faction through that. And we picked up with Elaine and Nynaeve and the Seafolk and the Kin as they head into Andor and start moving toward Caemlyn. Mostly it's just a lot of bickering on the road and kind of maneuvering and stuff, but Elaine does have some adventures in studying the ter'angreal as well.
Adventures.
But that's sort of a short interlude at the beginning of this, and then we head full on into Rand, and we have his machinations and his planning and the eventual whole campaign against the Shanshan and Altara. And that culminates in Rand pulling out Kalendor and basically going crazy with it, wrecking the Shanshan, but also wrecking many of his own forces. After that, we're back with Elaine and Nynaeve and that group as they continue heading toward Caemlyn. We have a murder. Adelius is killed, as well as Ispen, after being kind of poisoned with Crimson Thorn. And then we're back to Rand in Cairhien, where he returns. The maidens are unhappy with him. Min is unhappy with him. Cadsuane's unhappy with him. Lots of people are unhappy with him.
Seems to be the theme of the book.
The Renegade Ashaman are unhappy with him and try to kill him, but he evades that.
Sorry, did you mention the maidens?
Shows up. Yes, I did.
Yeah, okay, good.
And Taim shows up and tells Rand about what's going on at the Black Tower and the deserters and what they do with men who are going crazy. And in this moment, Fedwin Moore has gone crazy. And in one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the whole series, Rand has to feed Fedwin a cup of sleep and poison him. Yeah, and then kind of wraps up with that similar epilogue with the rumors spreading around. But before we got there, Perrin meets with Massima, and Fail, Aleandre, that whole group, Morghese, are captured by the Shido. So,
yeah.
The plot line of death has officially been launched.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a little bit to bitch about that going forward in this episode. But that's only gonna be a very, very small point. All things considered, because we have so much to talk about in this episode, particularly around Rand al'Thor. We got so much Rand and so many important, pivotal scenes for him as a character. I really can't wait to just dive into our character discussion. But first, we do have a few style points to get out of the way. Yes. I did write down that Jordan has significantly increased the amount of Rand that we get in this book, which was a major reason that I was interested in this book as a teenager, despite the increasing amount of side characters that I've been kind of griping about up until this point. Anything style-wise you want to kick us off with, man?
So I think that's interesting that you bring up that he increased the amount of Rand in this book, because relatively speaking, there's not a lot of Rand.
Oh, come on. The entire second half is practically Rand. We have a few...
So this is a 31-chapter book.
Yes.
And Rand's first point of view isn't until chapter 13.
Mm-hmm.
Then he has chapters 13 and 14. And then he's not back in until chapter 21.
Right, which is why I said
then he has
the
four
half.
straight. Then he has 4 straight. And then there are a couple of non-Rand chapters. Total, Rand only has 8 of the 31 chapters in this book.
Yeah. But I imagine that would still be proportionally greater than the amount of chapters he got in A Crown of Swords. I didn't look that up. That's just a feeling that I have.
I don't know. I don't think it is.
But for me, I still want to reiterate the fact that I said, the second half, because for the first half, our previous episode, We covered up through chapter 20, so we just did chapters 21 through 31 on this second half for Path of Daggers. And as you said, Rand did have a big chunk of like 4 straight chapters right at the beginning of this week's reading, you know, with his campaign against the Shan-Chan, and the fact that there were so many character-defining pivotal moments for him in those 4 chapters, as well as the fact that we do have a few more to come towards the end of this book as well. It's the fact that we have so many Rand scenes proportionally in this second half, as well as so many pivotal moments for him, that I really see this as a Rand book, despite the fact that, as you just said, we only have him for 8 out of 31 chapters, was it?
Yeah, and the kind of further point I wanted to make about that is that Rand only has 8 out of 31 chapters, and on top of that, in his 8 chapters, a big chunk of that Shan-Chan campaign is not from his point of view. We get several points of view from Shan-Chan characters. We get Kenar Mirage. We get Furyk Kharid. Welcome aboard, Furyk Kharid. I love him. We get Bakun. We get... Oh, what was the name of the one guy who sees... oh, man.
I still have my the chapter summaries open here right now on tarvalin.net. Who are you looking for? The Shan-Chan?
Varric.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, and then it's so little Rand, relatively speaking, and all this despite the fact that there is no Matt Cawthon in this book.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of room in this book is spent on Egwene. In fact, she has kind of the lion's share of room in this book, even though she only gets like one brief point of view in the chapters we covered this week.
Right. Most of it was in the first half, yeah.
And the kind of the results of that, though, is that this is the shortest book in the Wheel of Time.
It is.
Where with no Matt and with so little Rand, and honestly, like, even though, relatively speaking, Egwene and Elaine and Nynaeve have more time, they also don't have that much word count. You know,
right.
There's just a lot less that happens in this book than in some of the volumes we've gotten used to, you know, with these like massive word counts like Lord of Chaos and Shadow Rising, The Fires of Heaven, and you know, and while A Crown of Swords was smaller than those, it was still quite a bit bigger than The Path of Daggers.
Right.
So.
Yeah. No, there definitely seems to be a lessening of the spectacle and the explosive climax that we've come to expect up to this point, and more of like a character-driven study. And big things happening for our characters that are going to change their lives going forward and leading to much bigger things going forward. I did actually write down that this book, as an ending, in this book, it really has one of the most lackluster endings. I mean, what's our big climax here? It's the 3 renegade Ashaman attacking Rand in the Sun Palace, or you know, Fail being captured, Egwene finally traveling to Tarvalin. You know,
so. This is kind of my second style point, and that is the structure of this book is very interesting. The climax of this book really is Rand fighting the Shan-Chan, and we have an extended denouement after it.
Interesting.
And I think Robert Jordan recognized it, and you know, this is when he was starting to really lose control of the structure of the series, because if I'm willing to put money down that had you asked him, you know, years ago when he was still alive, when you sat down to plot your books, did you envision Rand fighting the Shan-Chan as the climax of the Path of Daggers? He would have said yes. But then, during the course of writing this book, because he was a discovery writer, he realized, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z as well, and they have to happen after Rand fights the Shan-Chan in order for Winter's Heart to work as a book and in structure.
Here's my problem with that, though. Wouldn't that lead to a much larger book, typically, rather than one, usually, you know, one this much smaller?
No, not necessarily, because there's no Matt. One of his... There's no Matt, and there's very little Perrin. One of his biggest point of view characters is not present at all, and another one only has like 4 chapters. You know, so...
You talking about Perrin?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, got you.
It's a weirdly structured book. It has the climax of one the climax of one plot line from, books ago with the Bowl of the Winds happens at the beginning of this book. This book very much seems like, even more than any other book except for possibly Crossroads of Twilight, a glue book. Something that he did not structure the way he wanted to. Something that doesn't adhere to a standard book structure in a series. But when you're 8 books deep into a series as massive as this, you're going to run into these issues where your storylines aren't lining up across the board. And so, with, for instance, Crossroads of Twilight, a lot of that book is spent kind of dealing with concurrent events to the climax of Winter's Heart. And in this one, the climax of Matt's storyline in A Crown of Swords is happening concurrently with the beginning of this book, which is the climax of Elaine and Nynaeve's storyline from the last book. Like, it gets all wonky.
You're actually, you make a good point.
So really, we have 2 major climaxes.
Oh, no problem. When you say 2 major climaxes, I assume you're referring to Rand's campaign against the Shan-Chan and his fight with the Ashaman in the Sun Palace?
No. The Bowl of the Winds.
Okay. And that's where I was going to go next with this, because I was about to say, I really wouldn't have minded too much if the Bowl of the Winds and correcting the weather that's wrong with the world had happened at the end of this book, because that would have been a much more fitting climax, I think. And it was very, very, of course, you can't argue that it was very, very pivotal for the world as a whole. It just seems, I don't know, it's a little odd that we finally got the Bowl of the Winds at the end of A Crown of Swords, and immediately at the beginning of this book, we see it used. It felt like he kind of jumped the gun there a little bit, considering how, I don't know. I don't want to say disappointing. This climax at the end of this book was not disappointing. None of this book was really that disappointing to me, but it just felt like after, Dumai's Wells, after killing the Forsaken in A Crown of Swords, what's coming next in Winter's Heart, like, this particular ending was a little, I don't know.
Well, and that's what I mean about, like, how he had to use this book as a glue book, because he couldn't just do the Bowl of the Wind scene at the end of this, because the ramifications of the weather changing play a big part in what's going on with the other storylines. Like with the Shido in Altara, and with Rand fighting the Shan-Chan in the middle of the Samaros, these hurricanes.
Yeah.
And on top of that, what would Elaine and Nynaeve and company have been doing all book long?
Right, he would have had to find something else.
Because he needed to get them to Camelin by the end of this book so that Winter's Heart can start with them in Camelin and set up the succession storyline and the siege.
Yeah.
So it's like he really had to fit some strange jigsaw pieces together, and the result is this book is a little more disjointed.
That's a good word for it.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad book, and in fact, I enjoyed this book greatly.
Same. I definitely enjoyed the book. It's not one of my favorites, but it's definitely not a weak book. I mean, there's still a lot to be had out of the short amount of time that we spent in the world for A Path of Daggers. For example, there's something that I came to appreciate a little more. This is still part of my... I'm going to insert this in my style discussion, despite the fact that it only really loosely belongs here, but the honest truth is that I didn't really want to add a ton of White Tower Aes Sedai into my characters to discuss for today. But I want to talk about Chapter 26 in this context. The extra bit with Ciane and Pivara and Zera and company, It was really different of a read this time around. This is my first time... not my first time understanding what's happening in this scene, but the first time I've understood the magnitude of what's just happened. We finally get to see some measure of true competence out of the Aes Sedai who remain in the White Tower. I think, unknown to Elida, her secret hounds have not only found what definitely appears to be a foolproof way of unearthing the Black Aja, but their astute observations and their faultless logic. I mean, it's incomplete logic, but it's still faultless logic. They've also unearthed the spies in the tower for the rebel Aes Sedai.
Ferrets. Yep.
Right? The ferrets that were planted. I thought that was really, really well done. When I realized what was coming, I think it was Ciane who was drilling Zera on why she lied about her return route to the tower. Seeing Zera's dawning horror, I kind of felt that same dawning horror this time around. I thought Jordan found a really excellent and really neat way to kind of bring these White Tower politics, back into the equation without, in my opinion, without boring us. I had some reservations about that in the last episode. I remember you asking me about that, about this entire plot line with what's going on inside the White Tower. But I hadn't realized how deftly done this was. I do have a whole new appreciation for this subplot. And to find that little nugget in a volume this size, I thought was a nice surprise. It really was.
Okay. Yeah, I do really enjoy that chapter. It gives us not only some insight into what Aes Sedai are capable of when they are at the kind of the peak of their game, but also gives us a little more insight into the workings of the tower, and we get to see these, like the Chair of Remorse and like this kind of lore aspect to the hidden workings of the White Tower. Yeah. And I enjoyed that a lot, and of course I like Ciane a lot.
Yeah, as you said,
in the past, and while this scene annoys me a little bit because this is when she sort of starts losing control of the task that was put in her lap, it's also a little hard to fault them because Saerin especially is extraordinarily competent and very easily and naturally takes command and is effective.
Okay. Well, was it Saerin who was grilling Zera on why she lied about her return to the tower, or was it Ciane?
The brown Saerin.
Oh, Saerin. Okay. Yeah, Ciane is the white. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's really indicative of what happens, especially in this scene. We finally get to see what happens, what can be accomplished when the Ajas work together. Because this is a combination not just of any one particular Aja, but we have the red represented with Pivara, with Ciane we have the white, with Saerin we have the brown. Zera, is she green? I don't remember which Aja she belongs to.
Talene was green.
Ah, got you.
Although black, but yeah.
yeah. But I think it's really cool to finally see what happens. Like, not only are these Aes Sedai in the tower, they're not all incompetent. It's really Elida that's behind a lot of this. But when they can finally come together towards a common goal, we see the Ajas, like their respective talents coming together to do some impressive things. I thought it was it was about time that we got some more of that, because up until this point, the White Tower has just kind of been like oh crap, here we go again. Let's get back into these incompetent fools and see what they're going to screw up in this book, right? But this time around, it was definitely interesting.
Although there's a little bit of that because we do have the Elida and Alviarin points of view.
We have the Elida and Alviarin points of view. Yeah.
We get to see a little more of their tug of war power struggle going on.
A little tough there. Yeah, definitely.
And we also got to see Tovin Ghazal.
Yeah,
and
with
the
Logain.
very ill-fated attack on the Black Tower.
Yeah.
Did not work out at all.
Not in the way that she expected, anyone expected, including the reader. I also want to point out Jordan's continued just blasé use of double entendres with his chapter titles. Chapter 27 is called The Bargain, and as not like Rand doesn't. Sorry, what am I trying to say here? I'm looking at my notes and I wrote something incorrectly here. Rand does what the hell? Oh, so Rand comes to this agreement with Cadsuane, right?
Yes,
but we also hear the terms that the Sea Folk had negotiated for, via Marana, literally the bargain, as they call it. I thought that was pretty cool. It was cheeky. I saw that and I was like, okay, there, Mr. Jordan. And while we're on the subject, I still love the way Cadsuane handles Rand. I mean, it's dangerous and at points, it's a little too much, but it's just so unique amongst any other character. I did definitely enjoy Chapter 27 a whole lot.
I like, that you're pointing out, the kind of double meanings of chapter titles that Robert Jordan does, because from a style point, those are actually Harriet's doing, by and large. Harriet almost completely named the titles in each of the chapters in this series.
In the series as a whole, not just like specifically for this book or anything.
In the series as a whole.
Wow, that's something I didn't know until now. That doesn't surprise me, but I hadn't known.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, that's always been something that I've enjoyed, and it's one of the reasons, for instance, I like Gene Wolfe so much. His titles always have kind of a surface meaning where you're like, oh yeah, that's what that's referring to. But if you dig down a layer or two, you'll find a second or a third meaning, and that's always a lot of fun to discover and dig into.
Damn.
So,
my final style discussion point here. I briefly just want to discuss Jordan's ability to break our heart with this scene we get with you know where I'm going with this? Oh wait, no. I think you don't know where I'm going with this. You're thinking I'm talking
Jonah
about
Nadley?
Yeah, no, that's not what or more. No,
well, so there are two scenes that really get me in this, and that's when Rand inadvertently kills Jonah Nadley with Kalendor, and then when Rand has to poison Fedwin Moore.
Yeah, both of those are heartbreaking, but neither of those impacted me as much as the scene with Van Dien discovering the bodies of Adelius and Ispan.
Really?
For me, I think that was the hardest scene in the book to read. And I think it was kind of, you know what I think it was? I think it was Jordan's play on this sort of legendary Aes Sedai poise, that kind of, and I wrote down, drove that point home, if you'll forgive the expression in this context.
Ooh.
Van Dien's still calm, rationally considering the situation, but it's only once the others have left the tent that she completely throws away any and all serenity, and just the image of that tent and that scene there with those shrill screams coming out. I think it was Lan that blocked Nynaeve's way back in to go comfort her. It was heartbreaking. I wrote that down. I said it before, and I'll say it again here. It was heartbreaking, and it had so much impact for it. And the fact that Jordan managed to do this to me with tertiary characters that I hadn't really given a damn about previously, I can only just stop and say, bravo. Bravo. Well done.
Yeah.
So that was the hard one for me. Go ahead.
Do you want to move into characters?
I really, really do. I really do.
Okay. Who do we want to start with?
I mean, the vast majority of my points are about Rand. So
Same.
We could start with Rand, or we can end with Rand. I'm for starting with Rand.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. So, as I said before, we have just so damn much happening for Rand in this volume. He's struggling to balance with everything that he's taken over. We've got Tyr, we've got Kyrian, we've got Andor, we have Ilion. Now we have Ilion. Not counting all of the Aiel, and now his negotiations with the Sea Folk. Even with Drew, you mentioned previously that Rand has started to learn the value of delegation and handing off responsibility to his, I don't say his inferiors, but those below him in chain of command. It's clear that the burden of authority is starting to seriously weigh down on the Dragon Reborn, and I want to get your thoughts on that. Like, what do you think of Rand's state in this book as he's continuously struggling to balance everything that he needs to balance?
Yeah, it is a major factor in his mentality throughout these chapters. The stress of command and the stress of having to trust other people is getting to him to the point where he starts, overtly becoming paranoid about even those closest to him, where he's wondering about like Flynn and Narishma, and he's like, I can trust Narishma. He went and got Kalendor and brought it to me. And I can trust Flynn because he saved my life.
Yeah.
But, people can change. And he's like, and it's like, dude, that happened like 5 minutes ago. Somebody's not changing their mind that fast, and what's scary about it is that he's aware of it. He stops himself every time he starts going down the road. And he's like, oh, this is like the dreads or whatever it's called, where he thinks of the Coplin who like starved to death because he wouldn't eat anything for fear of poison. And
right.
Yeah. It's pretty intense being in Rand's head, and this is where like I really want to harp on this as kind of a tie between style and character. This 4-chapter sequence, answering the summons, gathering clouds, fog of war, storm of battle, and a time for iron, is, in my opinion, at worst, a top 3 sequence Robert Jordan ever wrote. It is my favorite in the whole series. What he is doing here is so layered and so impressive, where he's tying Rand's mental state, his internal landscape, to an external battlefield landscape and an external political landscape. everything is so chaotic, everything is so underhanded and so convoluted, and he's sending out groups of these nobles and then bringing some back with Ashaman to misdirect people, and he's only keeping those least trustworthy nearby him so he can use them as the butcher's bill, as he tells Bashir, and it's so incredible how Robert Jordan weaves these layers of conflict seamlessly throughout these 4 chapters, where we have Rand dealing with like Torval and Rochade and Gedwin, and we have Rand dealing with Weiraman and Gregorin and Ailil and Anayela and Samaradrid, and then we have Rand balancing his like military momentum with Bashir's military advice and expertise and failing, while at the same time winning. And so it's this huge convoluted mess that culminates in just one of the most incredible scenes in the whole series, when Rand finally pulls out Kalendor and says, "I'm taking this into my hands." And we have some just amazing lines. He's being knocked from his horse, and he's in his madness. He thinks it's the Shan-Chan attacking him, and he's screaming, raging, "Come against me if you dare, I am the storm." And it's like making it literally rain lightning, thousands of bolts at a time. And I mean, it's so powerful. And then it ends with him realizing, seeing Jonan Adley's pale, dead face, and he's like, "What have I done?" And he turns in retreat. And then it's counterbalanced by that last scene where we have the Shan-Chan also turning in retreat, with their banner general dead and their forces laid in ruin. And he's like, for the second time on these shores, the ever-victorious army has tasted defeat.
Yeah.
Like, oh, so good.
I want to point out that this is not something that Drew is just randomly going off about on a tangent. This is something that he has been telling me for many, many years now. In almost all of our discussions about our favorite moments in the Wheel of Time, Drew, you've been bringing up this 4-chapter sequence, and I'm glad that I finally get a chance to sit you down and listen to you justify why it's such a great sequence. It really is. And it honestly is a very, very underrated sequence. I don't really see this listed very often in many people's favorite stretches of the Wheel of Time. Not many events in this book as a whole, honestly, have been mentioned a lot online. But this is something that I have a much greater respect for now that I'm friends with Drew McCaffrey, and I've heard him tell me exactly why it's so good. Going back in there and reading it has been surreal. It's been awesome. I am going to piggyback on this kind of point, though, with Narishma, and I'm going to go on a tiny little bit of a rant about Rand al'Thor. I kind of bitched about this in the previous episode. I'm going to bitch about it more now, and I'm going to add more justification for it. So, Narishma hands over this package with Kalendor hidden inside. We don't know what it is yet. And Rand stops the man just as he's about to leave the tent. And I was expecting something along the lines of, and Narishma, you did well. Turns out that Rand was just stopping him to prove how much of a dick he can still be, though. If you tell anyone about this, I will kill you. I was like, okay there, Rand. Narishma's going to take Kalendor. He's willingly going to return it to you without hesitation. But now you're worried he's going to start spreading your secrets. I get that Rand is struggling to hold on to sanity. This is something that you said to me before. I do get that. But compared to some of the other, more astute observations that we do see him making, particularly with his countered points to Torval earlier in the previous episode, about tactics and viable threats, this seems almost willfully ignorant. And that's what bothers me. It's only made worse in my eyes later in the Sun Palace as well, where Rand blatantly... He nearly kills Narishma, and he lies. He lies about not having recognized him.
Yeah.
In that moment, I honestly stopped, and I just thought, fuck you, Rand. I seriously had that thought.
Yeah, that's fair. And that goes back to why I love these chapters so much, being in Rand's head. because this is another juxtaposition where Rand's interior landscape is becoming so fractured and so mad, quite literally mad. But outwardly, this is Rand at the absolute height of his powers. We have him at the head of an army of 3 nations, plus men from all over the Westlands who have come of their own will to fight for Rand among the Ashaman and
but it's such
the
a
Legion
small
of the
army,
Dragon.
all things considered. I mean, look what he was doing.
But
in book
it's
5.
it's what this means. In Book 5, he's leading one faction. He's leading the Aiel. In
the
this,
Aiel
he's
are
leading
multiple
he's
factions
leading
themselves.
But they're all following him. It's like the clans have their own dynamic.
Right.
What he's doing here is leading men who hate each other.
Okay, got you. Okay.
And he's doing it with such force of will. Where even Weiraman and Gregorn, these guys who are used to having absolute control of their surroundings, find themselves jumping when Rand says jump. And he's leading not only a small army, if you can call 6,000 men a small army, but he's leading 50 Ashaman, which, as Rand says outright, he's like, I don't need these 6,000 soldiers. I could do this with just the Ashaman. Heck, I could do it myself.
Yeah.
But this is more than just Rand making a strategic, maneuver. This is Rand making a statement to the Seanchan. Look at the forces I can bring to the table. When he talks about how in some of these battles, all he does is stand there or sit on his horse. He doesn't get involved. He just stands there to look in charge. Like, he's not there to make a point about Rand al'Thor the warrior. He's here to make a point about Rand al'Thor the ruler.
Even more so than leading factions who have hated each other in the past. Obviously, the biggest example I could think of, the most notable being the Illianers and the Tyrans uniting behind the Dragon Reborn there and their small army here. But you know what I really found that to be particularly quaint was with the servants, and how we have servants in the green and gold livery of Illian, and we have servants in the black what are the colors here?
Black and gold.
Black and gold. Okay, so it was gold.
They're the defenders.
The defenders of Illian. But the fact that we get both of these, especially just with the colors mashed together in one single scene, I'm not like, it was, again, I used this word earlier and I'll use it here. It was a little surreal, just seeing the fact that one servant is Illianer and another servant is Tyrant, and they're just both doing the same thing. It kind of tied everything together, even on the micro scale. Obviously, on the macro scale, it's very important, but to see that even in the micro was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's such a masterful display of layering and contrast in this, where Rand outwardly, everything is about his appearance, and inwardly he's a mess. Like he can barely control Saladin. He's going crazy. He's got all of these machinations going on that he's barely keeping a grasp of, and in fact he's losing a grasp, and he almost dies during this battle because Weiraman pulls a Weiraman, essentially. He acts incompetent, but very cleverly opens the door for a Seanchan attack to get Rand. And this is one of the things that I really like about Weiraman as a character. He's one of my favorite Dark Friends in this series. He does such a good job of portraying himself as a complete idiot.
He's not?
And no.
Wow, I didn't know this. I just assumed he was an idiot this whole time too.
No. As you read through this, it becomes more and more obvious that he's very specifically crafting a persona in Rand's eyes, and is so good at what he does that he can make it look like idiocy. And then, in a contrast to him, we have Anayela here, who is also trying to craft a facade of, simpering, silly lady, but has this underlying, because Anayela is also a Dark Friend.
Yeah.
And she is much less competent at it than Weiraman.
So
Weiraman does many things that, had Rand not had backup plans and had Bashir not been around, Rand would have been screwed.
So you're saying Weiraman is being duplicitous?
Oh yeah.
I hadn't actually considered that before. I honestly thought he was just a buffoon. This must have been something that just kind of went over my head here. Interesting.
No, it comes to a head. You know, we can really touch on this more in Towers of Midnight, but it comes to a head when Rand outs him.
Yeah, yeah.
Where Weiramon shows very clearly that it was an act.
Huh.
So
see, in that scene that you're thinking of, where he calls him out on his shit, I kind of still
Weiramon,
walked away thinking he was just a buffoon.
Weiramon, in that scene, Weiramon starts being the buffoon and then realizes it's a waste of time. And he's just like, oh no, whatever, and walks away. Like, he stops. He very clearly shifts personas.
Another thing I really like about this sequence is how, and this is just the teenager in me going, oh, it's so cool to see Rand here, is seeing how Rand is leading these armies. He's leading his own men, and he's also leading Bashir. Sorry, like, Bashir's leading his men, and then we have Weiramon. Like, the fact that Rand himself is actually comparing his dead to Bashir's is just, it's kind of surreal and kind of cool. The fact that Rand is competent enough at this point to do that kind of thing, to lead a force like that tactically, as well as a figurehead. I just thought it was really cool to see Rand again acting the general in such a direct way, you know, that we haven't really seen even in Book 5, as I just mentioned previously, when he's leading the Aiel against the Shaido and Kyrian. You know, this place, this day, he still wasn't being as direct of a general as he was being, or at least of a tactician as he was being here.
Yeah, everything in that battle outside of Kyrian, Rand was in the background. You know, it was the Aiel clan chiefs who came up with the order of battle and then kind of ran it by Matt, Rand and got some advice.
Yeah.
Well, Matt came in after the fact.
Yeah. Rand was the one power. Rand was the big guns.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Matt, like, walked in after they'd done the whole planning thing and, like, went through the whole battle plan himself, and Land's like, it took you like 20 seconds to come up with a battle plan that the Aiel clan chiefs took like hours to do.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I can't wait to get more Matt.
Yes, yeah, we will get plenty more in the next book.
Yeah.
But you know, I remember in A Crown of Swords where you mentioned how much you enjoyed Rand in the latter parts of that book, where he's like on such a roll.
Yeah.
Like he's Rand at the peak of his powers.
The momentum
I think
he had.
This is another sequence like that, where Rand is just fully, you know, in control of, at least to an extent, in control of what he can be in control of, and he is riding on so much momentum until it all comes spiraling apart, like it does in The Crown of Swords when the bubble of evil hits the camp.
Yeah.
You know, and so we see these sort of rises and falls with Rand's, not necessarily his character arc, because I think his character arc at this point is going pretty steadily downhill. But the plot points in his character arc, he's showing tremendous aptitude and power, and then it all comes crashing down, and then it comes back up, and then it comes crashing down. And it's how Robert Jordan manages to keep tension going in, you know, the 8th book, the 7th book of a massive series, where you know that you're not going to get to the nadir of Rand's character arc for a while yet, probably. You know, like when we're only about halfway through the series, obviously we got a lot more to happen with Rand's character. We can't have him, you know, reaching these climactic character moments this early. So we need to find other ways to keep his plot line tense.
It's true. It does have to get darker before it gets lighter. And it will.
Yeah.
Another big moment for Rand. You did briefly touch upon this earlier. The fact that he finally has to accept defeat for once. Really hard to read, but still poignant. Now, the Dragon Reborn is not going to save the world without stumbling at some point or another. And this was a big stumble. I wrote down, I said, another stone on the path to humility. Right? And speaking of this metaphorical, you know, path to humility, chapter 27, there is a real winning moment where Mirana finally got to unleash her frustration at Rand. Oh, God, I found that so damn rewarding. She makes so many good points in such quick succession, and though she does, I admit, clearly go too far, it was still so entertaining to witness that I forgive her for every word. You know, Mirana Aes Sedai, so unflappable, so capable, flinging all of Rand al'Thor's ignorance back in his own face was just so much win. So much win.
Yeah, and you know, it's something to keep in mind as we read on here, how Rand's plot points are moving in this pattern, where Lord of Chaos, in many ways, was a loss for Rand. This is the first time he's experienced real danger to his person.
Yeah.
Where he was defeated by the Tower Aes Sedai. And while he was saved, was the Battle at Dumai's Wells really that good for him? Like, you know, he's a worse person. I think everybody can agree. Rand is a worse person coming out of Dumai's Wells. And then the next big plot line, he comes out on top with Ilian and taking down Samael. And he doesn't really have a major fall at the end of that plot line. But then here, he has another big fall. And the next plot line, we're going up to the cleansing, and he's back up on top of the world. And then his next one is going to be another fall with the losing his hand and Semirage and all of that in Knife of Dreams. And like, so he's seeing this, you know, this up down thing.
I don't know if I consider Dumai's Wells too much of a down. Yes, he did get captured by the Aes Sedai. Yes, he was beaten. Yes, he was given psychological problems going forward and trust issues going forward for the rest of his life. As well, you know, as well as just the claustrophobia that results from it. But in that scene, in that climactic scene, I mean, he broke the main body of the Shido, and he had the first Aes Sedai swear fealty to him. I mean, those are.
But did he do that?
Well, the Ashaman did that, I suppose.
Yeah. So, and it was Taim, and Taim is serving the Shadow. Everything Taim does there serves the Shadow. There's so many consequences to Dumai's Wells that are not good for Rand.
Oh yeah, there are plenty. There's a ton of them. Yeah, but I don't think it was all bad. There's a lot of win for Rand there at the end. It's part of the reason why I love that book so much. You know, it was difficult.
Well, it's certainly exciting.
It was difficult until the very, very end, and then it was just like, oh yeah, okay, I'm glad. But yeah, going forward, there's still a lot of negative repercussions from what happened to him there. We're still on the character of Rand. I have a couple more points. Actually, just one more point to make about Rand, and that's the fact that we're seeing more vulnerability from Rand to counter this growing arrogance of his. You know, when we have these rogue Ashaman attack the palace, twofold we see his vulnerability. First, we see his terror that Min is actually hurt, that she might actually be dead. Something we hadn't really seen up until this point. But then, you know, he waits until he's out of sight of Min before he embraces the true source, because he knows that this increasing sickness is going to make him look weak.
Yep.
So, I don't know. Like, he does have, as you said, Drew, he has a lot of highs, he has a lot of downs. He's on this roller coaster of emotions carrying him through his journey to Sheol Ghul. At the end of the book here, we do see some much-needed vulnerability out of Rand al'Thor to kind of still humanize this icon that is the Dragon Reborn. And, of course, at the very end there, wrapping up my points about Rand, a cup of sleep. You know.
Right.
Wow. Just damn. It's so brutal, so hard to read. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I have to say about Rand for this volume.
Yeah, okay. All right, do you want to move on to Elaine?
Yeah, I only have one point about Elaine. That's it.
Okay.
And I want to say that I'm so glad that Elaine has finally returned to Caemlyn and the Andor as a whole. It's been such a source of frustration for me watching the Aes Sedai kind of maneuver her here, maneuver her there. Kind of, I wanted her, even as a teenager, I recall specifically just being so impatient with the fact that she hasn't yet returned to claim the throne that is rightfully hers. It wasn't as eventful as I was expecting her return, but that's, you know, I find that kind of cool in its own right now, you know, seeing as how delicate the situation is in Caemlyn.
Yeah.
But the whole, I'll say this, I have a confession, the whole idea of this Rand isn't giving me the throne, or like I'm not accepting the throne, I'm claiming it just kind of irks me a little bit. I mean, I get it. Andor has this sort of unique pride in the strength of its queens. Morghese and Elaine, stellar examples. They both have some grounds upon which to act this, and I'm going to say petulant, you know? But when I heard, what really did it for me was when I heard Dylan claim that this entire moot point, let's be real, it's a moot point. Andor is Rand's no matter how much respect he has for Elaine. But this particular point was the entire basis upon which Dylan was going to decide standing for or against Elaine. You know, if you had said that
Yeah.
you're coming to accept it from the dragon, I would be against you. But the fact that you tore down his banners, the fact that you're claiming it in your own right, I'm going to support you. It felt almost cheesy. Almost cheesy.
Yeah.
And I couldn't help thinking again and again, like, we get it. Women are very powerful in Andor. Yeah, no, okay, I understand that Elaine is very strong of character. It's ultimately why she gathers the support she does. But holy crap, why do you have to be so special compared to literally every other nation that has sworn for the dragon? Why do you have to make it so clear again and again? We're special. Andor is more important than everybody else. It's just, it was beaten into the ground so much, it kind of felt like a flimsy excuse to make Elaine angry at Rand again. Sorry, go ahead. My rant is done.
Yeah, I mean, I understand why she acts the way she does, and I understand why the citizenship and the nobility act the way they do around, you know, the dynamics of, you know, the Lion Throne. That said, part of this is sort of being lost in the woods, and that is, the throne was lost. Morghese lost the throne effectively to Ravin.
Yeah.
Rand was the one who took that throne back from Ravin. Ravin
And
was
got
literally
revenge for her
sitting
mother's
in the
death,
throne
supposed death,
when
yeah.
Rand made that gateway into the palace. Like, this wasn't something where, like, Rand and Ravin were just incidental to the succession of, you know, the Lion Throne and the Rose Crown. They were directly involved. Ravin was sitting on that throne.
Yeah, I can't stop picturing Robin sitting on that throne and that look on his face when Rand opened that gateway, preceded by fire and lightning. Oh, I mean, we're talking about 3 books previously now, and I'm still getting chills just thinking about it. Sorry, I had to mention that before we got past it.
So it is very annoying that they want to completely ignore what Rand did for Andor.
Yeah,
like
they just want to brush it aside.
You know, they're treating Rand as Ravin, basically.
Yeah. As a usurper, as somebody
yeah.
who deigns to think that he owns the fucking country. No,
Even
he
though,
saved your fucking country, bitch. Sorry.
He's like, let me just make sure order is kept until you can come back and take your rightful throne. Like,
he killed one of the Forsaken, liberated your country from that Forsaken, and avenged your mother's death. At least do him the respect of leaving his banners up when you accept that throne, or if you claim the throne, because it's such an important distinction. Sorry.
The other part of that sort of sequence where they're traveling through Andor that I found amusing was the succession of, you know, scenes where Elaine is speaking with the citizens. And they're all like, man, it sure is a shame Elaine's dead. And Elaine's just like, yep.
Have to bite her tongue on that
she's definitely dead. Like, you know. And then the one guy's like, no, Elaine's alive and I can prove it. And she's like, yep. Like,
yeah.
But the last, no, you know what? I'm gonna save that for lore. I'm gonna save that for lore.
Okay.
So, is there anybody else you want to talk about from this segment?
I just have one point about Perrin. I briefly alluded to this earlier. I'm just gonna get this out of the way. I enjoyed watching Perrin put Massima in his place.
Yes.
I'm a little disappointed that he didn't press the point about traveling to meet Rand, though. I mean, okay, yada yada. Well, only the blessed Lord Dragon should travel so. But, like, I mean, all Perrin had to do was press the point. The Lord Dragon demands your presence right now. Or like, even something like, oh, you're above following his orders then. His direct orders don't pertain to you.
Or just be like, the Lord Dragon has granted his blessing to these Ashaman. You know, like, make it this pseudo-religious experience for Massima that he's, like, turned channeling into. Like,
yeah, but I would be so against Perrin's character to just randomly up and flowerly talk his way into that. Like, I don't know how would it feel if Perrin did that. It would have been effective, but that would have been so against Perrin's character in that case. I think it would have been more in line with who he is and his character to just bluntly come out and say, dude, I mean, you don't have a choice. He's ordered it. Are you going to be a hypocrite?
I mean, sure. Yeah, you could have done that too.
I don't know. It would have just been a little too, a little too false if Perrin had done that, I think. But there's so much bullshit that could have been avoided if Perrin had done so much as 5 seconds thinking before meeting with Massima. But nope. Now we're going to be stuck with 3 books of Perrin being a useless tit. So I'm not looking forward to his upcoming scenes. I'm really not.
To the plod.
Yeah, the plod. Yeah. So, and I just wanted to say I was really bummed that the Shan-Chen general, Kenar Mirage, he was killed. True. I thought he was incompetent. I thought he was truly competent. The fact that he managed to maneuver as well as he did against Rand al'Thor, Davrin Bashir, and it was Wiremon, right? That was leading the other faction.
Well, Wiremon wasn't really like making decisions. Rand and Bashir were laying out the strategic.
Three main groups. There was Rand's group, Bashir's group. There was not a third group.
Well, no, like they split off into like companies at different points, but the whole high level strategy was made by Bashir and Rand.
Yeah. Okay.
Wiremon wasn't sitting down and being like, "Well, my Lord Dragon, we're going to do this and this." Anytime he tries to do that, Rand's like, "You're a fucking idiot." Shut up.
When Rand was comparing his dead that topped Bashir's own dead by like close to 200. I thought there was a third group that still had yet to be accounted for.
I mean, he's talking about like groups led by the other lords, but that's not because of like, oh, Wiremon came up with this whole battle strategy.
No, I'm not saying Wiremon had anything to do with the planning of it. I just thought he was at the head of a third army.
A faction of the army, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Rand split them into 5 columns.
5 columns. I thought it was 3. That's what got me, okay.
So when they're going to face off against Mirage and his like 40,000, Rand splits them into 5 columns to hit them from all sides.
Okay, I thought it was 3. That's where I was getting confused. I thought Rand was at the front of one, Bashir at the front of a second, and I don't know why I thought Wiremon was at the head of the third. I thought it was 3 columns.
Wiremon was at the head of one of the columns, but it was like Gregorin had one, Samaradrid had one, Wiremon had one.
Gregorin and Samaradrid, Interesting. I forgot about those 2. Cool. Yeah, but I just want to say, Mirage, I thought he was a cool dude, man. I was a little bummed that he died, but knowing what's going forward with Furyk Kharid, he's a worthy stand.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, it's one of these strange things with the Shanshan that readers have to grapple with, how on a personal level, so many of the Shanshan are decent people.
Yeah.
But they are culturally and institutionally awful. Like
Fair.
You get these guys like Bakun, who's talking about, he's like, I don't take pride in something as petty as like, oh, my men have orderly tents. He's like, I've been in the Ever Victorious Army for 30 years. I do my job. I'm proud that I was chosen to be among the Forerunners, but like, other than that, I'm doing my duty. And like,
yeah.
And then, with Mirage and with Furyk Kharid, where Kharid like kills, was it Janaka or whatever his name was, the like stupid banner general that was with him. Who told the scouts to press on, and because of that they missed Jadranka.
Oh.
He told the scouts to press on until they found Rand's army, and Kharid's like, you did what? And all the other officers are like, oh shit.
Yeah, I remember that moment. Yeah, you did.
And then immediately afterward, their army gets ambushed because the scouts missed all the Legion of the Dragon guys that they weren't looking for, and Jadranka's like, no, we're gonna rally the troops and attack, and before he could finish the sentence, Kharid puts his sword through the guy's throat, and he's like, we rally what can be rallied, and we retreat.
Yeah, we save what can be saved. Yeah.
Yeah.
Damage control.
So, yeah, it's fun being in certain Shanshan heads, because they're cool people, but it's always important to keep in context what, the dark side of what Shanshan is. While they have these redeeming qualities, they also have these awful qualities.
Yeah.
So
cool. That wraps up all of my character points for this section of this book. I'm ready to go on to my questions for you, if you have nothing else as far as characters.
I do not have anything else as far as characters.
Okay, so I have 4 questions for you.
All right.
I'll start right now, and I'll say let me finish this one, because I'm going to ask the question, but I'm also going to give my brief thoughts, and then I'll see what you say. Okay.
Okay.
So I want to ask, what the hell did happen with Narishma when he went to retrieve Kalendor? Because as I understand, the man claims he was almost killed due to Rand leaving out key details, but Rand doesn't seem to understand what went wrong. He seems certain that he gave the other man all the information necessary. And I assume Narishma isn't lying. I mean, I'm pretty sure that he's... I'm not pretty sure. I'm absolutely certain that he's loyal. So what gives? Go ahead. What happened?
So... there is not a canon answer here.
Oh,
and
great.
This was actually something a question I was going to put to you to see what you thought.
I just thought of a possible answer, but go ahead.
Because there are really 2 options here. One is that Narishima's being honest and Rand's being honest. And Rand told him everything that he did with Kalendor. Narishma went to get it, and one or more of the Forsaken in the intervening time went and laid traps around Kalendor for Rand that Narishma barely avoided.
Okay.
The other option here is that Rand, in his growing paranoia and distrust, wanted to trust Narishma and wanted to use this as a test for him, which he did, for sure did. Mm-hmm. But some little part of him lied. Some little part of him was like, I don't fully trust him. I'm not going to tell him about this one thing.
But then,
personally, I think that Rand was telling the truth, and it was one or more of the Forsaken who left traps around Kalendor.
Oh, I hadn't considered that possibility. See, the answer that I just really quickly came up with while you were describing that, I'd like to offer one possible solution. When Rand showed him this password, or not this password, but like the way to get through his defenses around Kalendor, perhaps the power fluctuating weirdly in the location where they were at the time might have affected the weaves that Rand showed Narishma, or corrupted the weaves that Rand showed Narishma to get through the defenses around Kalendor.
I don't think that's the case.
No?
Because the way Narishma described it was like, your instructions were incomplete. Not your instructions were wrong. Your instructions were incomplete. You didn't tell me everything.
Okay, yeah. I remember Narishma saying that too, that it was incomplete and that...
So...
I'm definitely certain that one or more of the Forsaken had to at least visit the site to see if they could take it out safely. So I think that does lend a lot more credence to your theory there for sure.
Yeah.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. So that's one question that I had for you. Number two, and again, I'm going to expand upon this past the first question. But why did Rand lose control of Kalendor? Like, was it anything more than the usual manner in which Kalendor kind of just makes him lose control? Or is it, as I assume, kind of twofold, in that it increases Rand's madness, and that this area of the continent is still affected by that strenuous use of the Bowl of the Winds? Could it be the fact that both of these factors together caused him to lose control on this scale?
I mean, it may have been both, but I think by far the biggest factor there was Kalendor magnifies the taint.
Yeah, which is something else I definitely want to discuss very briefly just after this. So you think it was just the fact that Kalendor, because it magnifies the taint, it just gave him that extra push and just made him lose focus, lose control of his weaves, and just blindly lash out in a rage against his any and all perceived threats in his immediate vicinity.
Yeah, because the way we see, this like resonance effect from the Bowl of the Winds impact weaves before this, it doesn't like misdirect weaves. It just makes it harder to snap them in like together. Like when Deshiva shows him the gateway, and he's like, "Look, man, look," and he like the weaves are like vibrating.
I would love to see Narishma actually say, "Look, man, look at this, look at that."
Yeah, or yeah. Like Deshiva doesn't like make a different weave or have the gateway go somewhere else than he was intending. It's like it does what he means it to do. It's just harder to do, and it wants to fall apart. Whereas what Rand did was lash out in all directions rather than do what he planned on doing. And so I think that is an effect of the magnified taint and madness.
It could, yeah. He was going crazy at that point. It was very intimidating to read. Mm-hmm. I loved that scene. Before we continue on with my next point here,
there's one more thing I wanted to add to that.
Go for it.
That could have played a role here. Rand names the Dark One.
Yeah, and I didn't see any noticeable change in like atmosphere or sickness or the attention of the Dark One.
So the previous time Rand named the Dark One,
wasn't that in Faldara?
In Faldara. Do you remember what happened?
Yeah, he got nauseous. He saw like tunnel vision. He like lost like focus with his eyes, and Nynaeve calls him on it. She's like, "I was watching you when you said the name Shaitan. You just felt his attention."
So, Rand felt like his head was struck by a gong, and things were like shivering into and out of focus.
Right, he saw two of Kalendor in front of him after he was kind of like knocked down for the second time.
Yes, and that aligns with how he was seeing like double and things going in and out of focus in Faldara when he named the Dark One.
Okay. I thought that could have been just Bashir knocking him out across the head, but that's interesting.
But yeah, it's like, I really think Rand did attract the attention of the Dark One, and that may have played a role in how out of control things got.
Interesting. I think I just remembered something that I had meant to discuss in the future when I brought it up weeks and weeks ago when we were discussing, I think it was in Lord of Chaos Part 1, and I was talking about my distrust of Bashir because of what he did in his test to see if Rand who he really claimed to be. I said there was another moment that I was distrustful of Bashir until a moment in Path of Daggers. I think I said that in that episode, until a moment in Path of Daggers. And I think this is that moment, if I'm remembering this correctly, if memory serves. It was when Bashir decided, I'm going to knock him over. I'm going to actually strike him and make sure that the Dragon Reborn loses Kalendor. And I have to get his attention because he is killing all of us. He's killing the Shan-Chan. He's killing his own army. I think it was this moment where I actually decided, okay, Bashir he's the real deal. He might have some hidden motive, but he's honest and he is not a dark friend. I think it was in this scene that I decided that.
Okay.
Just the fact that he was willing, while Rand al'Thor is screaming, "Come at me, Shaitan," and it's literally, as you said before, raining lightning in all directions. Like, this is one of the most powerful moments that Rand as a figure has. The fact that Bashir was willing to tackle him and strike him down in an attempt to stop him ending innocent lives, at least what he perceives as innocent lives on his own part. I thought that was very ballsy, and very honest. And I thought, okay, at this point, I think this is where I started to officially and completely trust Bashir again.
Yeah, okay.
I just remembered that as you were saying that, so I wanted to get that out of the way too.
Okay.
Okay, here. So, my next question. Were you done addressing this point? Okay. My next question. We learn from Cadsuane that Kalendor, in her words, can only be safely wielded if linked with two women and one of them guiding the flows. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and major spoilers for the rest of the series. Probably the biggest spoiler possible, but that's not what happened in the Pit of Doom. Right? Like neither Moiraine nor Nynaeve were guiding the flows there. It was still Rand guiding the flows. Could it just be like in this particular moment, Rand wasn't concerned about using Kalendor safely?
So I need to reread that scene because I haven't read A Memory of Light in 7 years.
God damn, really?
Yeah, I read it the day it came out, and then I read it again a couple weeks later.
God, I've read it 15 times since.
Yeah. But if I remember that correctly, that is what they did. Moradin grabbed Kalendor, and they forced him into a circle with Nynaeve and Moiraine. Yeah, and then Rand linked with them on top of that, and then he managed the flows.
Okay, so the circle was actually Moiraine and Nynaeve, and Moradin and Rand was just linked with the women, or one of the women.
Yeah, because they needed Moradin using the true power through Kalendor.
Right. And then Kalendor being a Saw Angreal for the taint. Or for the true power. True power, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would have to reread. I may be fuzzy on the details there.
I kind of like your explanation of that. The fact that the circle, what I was thinking beforehand was the circle meant, Rand, Nynaeve, and Moiraine. I didn't stop to consider that, no, it was actually a trap. It was Moradin wielding Kalendor, Nynaeve and Moiraine linking with him, taking control of it with the flaw, and then Rand just feeding off of that to combine all of the powers into one. Interesting. Okay.
Correct.
I kind of like that.
Because Moradin is undoubtedly holding Kalendor.
Oh, yeah, you can't argue that for sure. My last question, and this is something that's a little, how do I want to put this? Just from left field, I suppose. The Dark Friend, David Hanlon. Is this Millar? Before we know him as Millar?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that my suspicions there. This is the first time I actually made that connection. I wanted to make sure I made the correct connection there.
Okay, yeah. I'll just tack onto that because we do have this one scene. Um, I enjoy this scene greatly.
With the lady Cheyenne.
Jakeem likes his brandy.
Yeah, Jakeem. Oh my god. Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, as far as the deaths that he was worried about, this wasn't as bad.
Yep. So, lore things before we get into our listener questions. I really only have like one more lore thing that we haven't already discussed.
Okay.
I was going to talk about Kalendor, but we kind of went over that already.
Sweet.
That is Elaine's Terangreal.
Okay.
This is where the Red Rod Terangreal comes in.
Okay.
Because this is kind of a meme at this point in the fandom.
Oh?
And a lot of people still are like, what happened there? This was never answered outright by Robert Jordan, because when people asked him about it, he was like, "You're not old enough." Like, even if they were like adults, he'd be like, "You're not old enough. I'll tell you when you grow up." Like, and then he also made a comment at one point where he was like, "Why is it always the women who ask about this?"
Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
But the implication given is that there was something very sexual involved with this. There's the Red Rod, like the kind of joke name for this is that it's like Elaine's Rod of Pleasure.
Okay.
And later in Winter's Heart, we'll see Birgitta sort of reference back to this when Elaine is getting it on with Rand, and Birgitta's like, "I'm gonna get drunk enough to you know what? I'm gonna get drunk enough to strip my clothes off and dance on the table naked," implying that is what Elaine was doing after messing around with this Terangreal.
How does that imply that, though? I don't. How?
We'll get there when we get to that scene, but
Okay.
it very much is a reference back to this.
I remember Brigitte saying
she's-
exactly that she wants to get drunk enough to do this, to dance
because
on a table.
Brigitta's saying it like in reference to like Elaine specifically in that moment. But we'll get to that next week when we record the first half of Winter's Heart.
That'll be in the first half?
So, yeah.
Okay.
That's in like chapter 12 or 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, that was my only kind of lore point that we
Elaine's
Haven't
Rod
already
of
touched.
Pleasure.
But we do have a few listener questions.
Do we? Awesome.
So, we had one of them, Michael McKnight, asked what was up with the traps around Kalendor, additional people putting their own traps on top of Rand's, or what? We addressed that, and I think I agree with him that it was additional, it was Forsaken putting their own traps. And then Kevin Stotts replied to that, and he said, along this line, what about Jahar Narishma's part in the prophecy? And I think that's a really good point, because he is referenced in the prophecies of the dragon. Who draws it out shall follow after. And that is something that Rand kind of forgets in this sequence when he's being mistrustful, is that Narishma fulfilled that prophecy, and that prophecy implies he will be a loyal follower of Rand. He will follow after Rand.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, okay.
Yeah, and then Michael McKnight asks again, he's like, what do you think about the length? Isn't this the shortest of all 14 books? And it is. I kind of addressed that a little earlier in our style discussion, but
I may or may not wish that Crossroads of Twilight had been shorter yet.
I believe Crossroads of Twilight is the second shortest.
Yeah, I think it, yeah. I don't know. I wish Crossroads of Twilight had been 10 pages long, because that's about all that book I could fucking stand.
Where did that go? I'm trying to find so yeah, Path of Daggers is a hair over 200,000. Crossroads of Twilight is about 250,000.
Oh wow! Crossroads of Twilight is like an entire quarter longer.
Yeah, in
again.
fact, as I'm looking at this chart, both the Dragon Reborn and Winter's Heart are shorter than Crossroads of Twilight.
What? Winter's Heart?
Yeah.
That's such a thick paperback that I have, though. It looks like one of the longest books.
No, it is also pretty short. I think it's only like 34
Wow.
or 35 chapters. When you
paperback
compare
is
that
so
to like,
thick.
when you compare that to Lord of Chaos, which has like
Oh, yeah.
65 chapters.
Lord of Chaos and Shadow Rising, both of which are huge books. Oh, look at me
Yeah.
swearing up a storm here.
But that said, you're like, just looking at the physical size of a book isn't really indicative of length.
I'm just explaining why
Because-
I had the misconception.
Yeah, because you can get like different thicknesses of pages and things like that.
Font sizes and
But yeah, Path of Daggers is the shortest, and I mean I think it's the shortest because of this weird structure in it. It's something that Robert Jordan just had to do. I doubt he wanted it to play out the way it is, but just because of the way his various timelines were working out across character plots, he had to throw this together, and if he had made this book longer, he would have had to basically combine it with another book. And I don't think he was ready to write a 550,000 word book.
Yeah.
He wrote like a 390,000 word book, but it's a far cry. That's like longer than the first draft of Oathbringer.
I was gonna say it's no Oathbringer. I was actually going there next. Yeah.
Yeah, like Oathbringer in the published version was about 460,000 words.
Yeah.
So like almost 100,000 words shorter than if he had combined Path of Daggers and Crossroads or Path of Daggers and Winter's Heart.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how you could how you could really justify.
Well, I don't
writing a
think he
book
would
that
have
big.
combined them in their entireties. He probably would have just had to stagger some of these scenes into,
I mean, I don't know how he would have done that.
Yeah,
though.
but
That's the
then
thing.
we did have a
Like,
discrepancy with timelines. We see a lot of people complaining about Tam Thor being with Perrin and also being with Rand in the Sanderson trilogy at the end. Like we did have some timelines that ended up not overlapping, right? Or actually,
Right.
sorry, overlapped too much, I should say.
Yeah. Okay. And then so we only have one more question from Johnny Andrzejewski, and he says,
Okay.
I'm guessing a lot of certain parts from the Shanshan campaign were informed by Jordan's time in Vietnam. What do you think?
Well, we talked about this a little bit, I think, in The Dragon Reborn. I think it was in there. Talking about his... I think it might have been actually in The Shadow Rising Part 3, now that I'm thinking about it. Talking about how
It was, yeah.
his experiences as a veteran soldier might have influenced the way some manners in which he wrote this series. I would just say, as far as my answer to this question goes, listen to the Shadow Rising Part 3 that we covered. I think we did a justifiable job on that front. But what about you, dude?
So I really do think it is. He has such a grasp of the frantic, chaotic, fractured nature of warfare.
Fog of
in
war,
this
storm of
sequence.
battle. I mean, everything is said in those words.
Exactly. And how I brought up early on, even though we call these Rand chapters, much of these chapters are not in Rand's head. We're jumping around. We're in the heads of like 3 or 4 different Shanshan soldiers. We're back with Rand, and then we get through these various points of view enough pieces to put the whole picture together. So having this limited third-person perspective can bring out, I think, this authentic version of warfare. And that's something that Robert Jordan was able to do so well because he had that experience in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Okay.
I agree.
So, that brings us to the end of our listener questions. But we still need to go over our 3 favorite scenes.
Yes, we do. Yeah. I have 4 written down, 3 that are my favorite, 1 of which is an honorable mention.
Okay.
I'll give us a start, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
I want to highlight the scene with Rochaid investigating the corpse of Egan Padros and tossing Rand the coin that he supposedly finds on the man. And the fact that Rand doesn't even react. He just lets the coin bounce off of his arm. I think that has to go on record as perhaps the subtlest you I've ever seen one character offer to another. You know? And I wanted to ask, what does it say about Jordan's knack for creating a character like Roshide and others like Torval and Corlin Dashiva that bring out such vindictive glee out of a reader like myself whenever we get to see Rand get the chance to knock them down a peg or three. I just thought it was well done. Very well done.
Yeah. Yep.
What is perhaps the greatest and most subtle hint that Jordan has placed in this entire series, I think, regarding the nature of the flaw with Kalendor. And in her words, it seems to magnify the taint. And I wrote down, what a beautifully clever way to hide and yet hint at one of the biggest secrets that we will ever come to know in this series. It seems to magnify the taint. She is so close. She's just so close, and she's not quite there. It's such a brilliant tease. I get chills every time I return to that line, especially now that I know the secret.
Yeah.
It's just so good. It's so good. Of course, you're going to be able to tell how much of a Cad Swain fanboy I am because, of course, my next favorite scene, my very favorite scene, also has to do with Cad Swain.
Wow.
And it's something that we covered in the previous episode, in part 1 of A Path of Daggers, the agreement between Cad Swain and Sorelia. As I said before, and I'll say it again, this is one of the most important moments in the entire series. The united efforts of these two women, who are, each as powerful of character as they are, and in Cad Swain's case, of course, as powerful in the One Power, what it ultimately means for the journey of this soul of the dragon, it's just, I love it. I love it. It's so important. In my honorable mention, that was my most favorite scene in this entire book, but my honorable mention is this very final scene, very, very final scene, where Jordan pulls out into this omniscient third person that he does on occasion. He gives us the sweeping ending, but he has this memorable line. They planned, and the pattern absorbed their plans, weaving toward the future foretold. This reminder that Jordan gives us that though everything kind of seems to be falling further and further apart, there is still a plan, and there's many secrets to come. I may have had a small gripe or two about the lack of spectacle that we had with this particular ending, but with his final lines, Jordan still manages to keep our trust. I thought it was excellent. And I also wanted to point out the added detail at the end of the previous scene with Egwene. That ends the narrative proper. The duality we get in that imagery with Dragonmount rearing black and smoking against a white sky to kind of tie together nicely this black and white symbol of the Aes Sedai that Egwene is growing to represent. The man is just so damn clever with his visual metaphors. He's just so damn clever.
Yeah, that he'd been looking forward to writing that scene with the gateway and Dragonmount black against the white sky and Tarvalon. I hear him
chuckling with honest mirth as he writes that scene. So perfect.
Oh yeah.
So that's it for me.
Okay. So perhaps surprising, perhaps not. All 3 of my favorite scenes are during that sequence, Rand against the Shanshan.
Not surprising at all, but I'm so excited to hear why.
And I'm going to bring this down to the actual sentence, word by word level. Okay. Because I love Robert Jordan's writing and his turn of phrase. My number 3 scene is from Varric's point of view. This Shanshan under officer who's trying to get back to was it Banner General Chianmai, and then he finds him dead. But it's before he finds him dead. He's sneaking through the woods and he sees these Altarans. And I'm going to read this out because it is so incredibly written. Black streaks flashed from among the trees, emptying Altaran saddles. Their horses dashed in every direction as the riders fell, and then there were only a dozen corpses, sprawled on the damp carpet of dead leaves, at least one crossbow bolt jutting from every man. Nothing moved. Varric shivered in spite of himself. Those foot in blue coats had seemed easy at first, with no pikes to stand behind, but they never came into the open, hiding behind trees, in dips in the ground. They were not the worst. He had been sure, after the frantic retreat to the ships at Falme, that he had seen the worst he ever would, the ever-victorious army in a rout. Not half an hour gone, though. He had seen 100 Terrabeners face one lone man in a black coat.
Oh, yeah.
100 Lancers against one, and the Terrabeners had been ripped to shreds. Literally ripped to shreds. Men and horses simply exploding as fast as he could count. The slaughter had continued after the Terrabeners turned to flee. Went on so long as one of them remained in sight. Like, what gorgeous writing. What a way to paint a scene. You know, like, people will complain about Robert Jordan's descriptions, but man, that guy's descriptions.
But man, that guy's descriptions. Hell
and
yeah.
then my second scene is from Khareed's point of view, because Furyk Khareed is one of my absolute favorite characters in the series.
Yeah, you've mentioned, yeah.
He's probably my favorite, like, tertiary character. And it just says so much about his personality when he's, you know, sitting with these officers and this Jadranka guy who is, it says Jadranka is the senior of the three captains behind Khareed, having served as long as Khareed himself. A short, thin man with a prominent nose and such airs, you might have thought him of the blood. That horse would stand out at a mile. You know, and then Jadranka's, you know, belittling the news and Rand's army, and he goes, "We'll crush them with swords or brooms. The light burned my eyes. I can hardly wait for a decent engagement. I told the scouts to press on until they found them. I won't have them slipping away from us." "You did what?" Khareed said softly. Like, just that one line.
Those 3 words with so much menace and weight.
Yeah. Like, it says everything you need to know about Furyk Khareed. And then the fact that just further down the page, you know, Jadranka says, "Do you think to abandon your men? We rally them and attack you." He cut off, gurgling, as Khareed's sword point went neatly into his throat. There were times fools could be tolerated, and times not.
Yes. Oh.
So, and then, of course, my favorite scene in this book, my favorite scene in the whole series.
Whole series.
Rand, and I'm going to read this out because it is so damn
Whole
good.
series. Okay, go for it.
Yeah. With Kalendor blazing in his hand, he did not remember raising the blade overhead. He stared at the hills where his enemies hid. They were gray now, with thickening rain and dense black clouds blocking the sun. What was it he had told Egan Padros? "I am the storm," he whispered. A shout in his ears, a roar, and he channeled. Overhead, the clouds boiled. Where they had been the black of soot, they became midnight, the heart of midnight. He did not know what he was channeling. So often he did not, in spite of Asmodean's teaching. Maybe Lews Therin was guiding him, in spite of the man's weeping. Flows of Saidine spun across the sky. Wind and fire and water. Fire. The sky truly did rain lightning. 100 bolts at once. Hundreds. Forked, blue-white shafts stabbing down as far as he could see. The hills before him erupted. Some flew apart under the torrent of lightning like kicked anthills. Flames sprang up in the thickets, trees turning to torches in the rain, flames racing through olive orchards. Like, and then a little further down, shoving Kalendor high, he screamed at them, "Come against me if you dare. I am the storm. Come if you dare, Shaitan. I am the dragon reborn." 1,000 sizzling lightning bolts hailed down from the clouds. Again something struck him down. He tried to fight up again. Kalendor, still shining, lay a pace from his outstretched hand. The sky shattered with lightnings.
You know, if you had asked me 10 years ago what I thought of this scene, I would have probably told you, oh my god, I forgot how good this was. That line, "I am the storm," is just so powerful. But since then, honestly, I think it's kind of led to, I don't want to say a trope, but I've heard that line kind of reiterated and reformed in so many other fantasy books at this point. I mean, a lot, even in the Stormlight Archive, is very, very similar to that. It has since been ruined for me. When I went through and read this time, that exact scene that you just went over, I kept thinking to myself, oh, this would have been so cool if it wasn't just copied by every other author afterward. That line, "I am the storm," is so awesome. It's such a good line. But I don't know. I've heard it too much since then, that it's kind of lost its magic for me. But that does nothing to lessen Jordan's ability in this scene on a word-by-word basis, in which he can just give you that evocative punch in every one of these scenes. Is just so good. I see why it's your favorite. I see why. And years and years back now, we've been discussing this. I'm so glad I've managed to finally get Drew down and justify why this is such a great sequence. Everybody else can hear why now. It's just
Yeah.
It's moments like this that really make me wish Jordan had been around to write the end of the series. Sanderson did a perfect job. He did a phenomenal job with the ending of this series. But oh god, it makes you wonder what was lost when we lost the man who was Robert Jordan.
Right. Yeah. So before we move into the final draft, do you have any concluding thoughts you want to go over?
No. Actually, I do. I just have one. I wanted to reiterate again. I think this is the most open-ended book in the series at this point. I asked you earlier, like, what was our real big climax, and I got your answer on that. But I don't know. When you compare it to like the previous climactic explosive scenes that we had in the Shadow Rising and the Dragon Reborn, in Lord of Chaos, Crown of Swords, Fires of Heaven. I mean, there's clearly lots to come going forward, knowing especially what we know. But as far as endings in the Wheel of Time, Path of Daggers kind of left a bit more to be desired. But I do want to say that knowing what I know is going to happen in Winter's Heart, I am so down. I am so ready for it. And for now, I will say I've had my fill of Randall Thor's badassery. And like a nice filet mignon, I'm just kind of left with this warm glow and a stupid grin on my face. It was so good while it lasted. It was so good.
Okay.
That's it.
So I only have one concluding thought, and that is I'm going to express my eternal bafflement that anytime you make a post online and ask people what their least favorite books are in the series, inevitably people mention The Path of Daggers, almost to the same extent as Crossroads of Twilight. And I will just say I do not understand that. I don't have an explanation for it. There's so much cool stuff that happens in this book. It's short, it's fast, like it does not drag at all. I don't know. I don't get it.
I would kind of chalk it off to, at the risk of sounding pretentious, reader ignorance.
I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Are we ready to go into the final draft?
I think we are.
The final draft, my man.
Yes.
Okay. I was going to say my man or my brother, and I ended up saying my band. Oops. But, I'm not going to surprise anybody that listens to this at this point. So I have 2 entries now for the final draft for today.
Oh, okay.
Neither of which are particularly clever. One of which I've been waiting a little while to bring to the podcast, just because it does tie into the Wheel of Time, but in a sort of generic way.
Okay.
I've been waiting to bust this out on one that I didn't have any particular tie-in to any moment in this book. This kind of just ties into the Wheel of Time as a whole. This here is from Amsterdam Brewery. It claims it to be a deluxe amber.
Okay.
I'm on the website right now, and they claim it's perfectly balanced beer, combines all the qualities of a traditional pale ale with smoothness of an easy drinking lager. It was cheap. I think it was like $3.15 for a single can here. But the name of this beer here, it was okay. It did kind of taste cheap, but there's nothing wrong with that. It wasn't bad in any way. There's nothing negative I had to say about this beer. It went down easy, despite the fact that it was warm. So as I've said before in previous episodes, that kind of speaks to the quality here. This is an ale, and it's called, I'll show you here, Drew, it's called Big Wheel.
Nice.
So you can see what I meant when I said it kind of just loosely and generically ties to the
it's a meta tie-in.
It's a meta tie-in, yeah. And it's good for one wherein I don't have like a specific tie-in and a specific moment for this book that we just finished. But
yeah, that's like when I brought The Ages on for the Great.
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah.
I you know what? I forgot about that until you brought it up. Yeah. But the second thing I was drinking, because I don't want to drink too much beer over the course of an episode, because as I've said before, I just said it on our live stream 50th episode, I have the bladder of a 9-year-old girl. So if I had been drinking too much beer, I would have had to stop and pause this podcast several times for a trip to the bathroom. To counteract that, I was drinking a liqueur. This here is a Disaronno.
Oh, amaretto.
It's amaretto tasting liquor, you know, and it's got, or liqueur I should say, it's got like the characteristic kind of almond sweetness to it. It's so sweet. I found it disgusting, but deliciously disgusting in a weird kind of
it's super good
way. It's so good, but it's almost disgusting with how good it is. It's just so sugary. I took a big old shot once you were doing your summary there at the very top of this episode, and I was just like, I'm sure I was making a face in the webcam because it just felt like the inside of my mouth should have been crystallizing with sugar. It was just so overpoweringly sweet. But I mean, as far as drinks go, I just imagine this would mix very, very well with most colas. A root beer would probably do it justice. Coffee, I'm reading here that coffee apparently it goes very good in. But as far as like the amaretto, the Disaronno, it's a nice tasting liquor, 28% ABV, and it definitely floated me through the first half of this episode before I opened the big wheel, or just big wheel. So
a little bit of trivia about Disaronno.
Yeah?
I don't drink it super often, but I have a soft spot for it because back in it would have been summer of 2010, I wrote the bulk of my second book, and I did so with a Dixie cup of amaretto, of Disaronno specifically, right next to my computer the whole time. So...
Really?
That was like my go-to drink that summer for some reason.
Awesome. So,
I
had a phase like that with Crown Apple for some reason. A whole summer I was just going insane about Crown Royal Apple whiskey. It was just it's good stuff. Very similar. So what are you drinking, dude?
You know, I'm kicking myself because I was in a rush today. I didn't really have the time to properly put thought into what beer I wanted to do. Because what I should have done was gotten like a brandy barrel-aged barley wine or stout or something in memoriam of Joachim Carradine.
Oh, damn it. Good.
But what I'm drinking is an East Coast IPA from True Brewing Company. I have a feeling I'm going to be bringing True on fairly often going forward. They're starting to distribute a lot more, so it's easier to get their stuff. And they're one of my favorite breweries in Colorado. I just had a beer on from them for our Iron Fist episode.
Oh.
You know, Star Wars, the beer, no joke, was called In a Galaxy Far, Far Away.
Oh, fuck off. Yeah. Oh, my God.
So they have, like, great names for their beers. Tons of variety. And I'm like, this is going to be a gold mine I'll be going back to again and again. But yeah, so this is an East Coast IPA. It's pretty light drinking. It's not as, like, fruity as I would expect from like an any IPA. Although I guess this is an East Coast IPA, so not technically a New England IPA.
You'd expect a lot of citrus in an IPA.
But it's plenty hoppy, but it's pretty easy going. It's kind of muted, very drinkable. It's I think it's 5.7%. Excuse me.
Bitter?
Yeah, a little bitter, not too bad.
Okay.
But it's tasty. It's really drinkable. And this is kind of thematic for the book in general, for a couple of scenes, including Elaine's attempted unweaving of the gateway, and Rand using Kalendor and the whole battle. It's called Ageless Fire.
Okay. Ooh. I like the duality in that. Ageless, of course, being a big theme of the cyclical nature of the Wheel of Time as a whole. Fire representing...
And how Aes Sedai look.
Yeah. Oh, hey,
look.
There you go. I hadn't even considered that. My man, this is like a triple entendre right there. That's good. Yeah. I like it.
So, I thought it was a pretty good,
like
pretty good submission, but I do wish I had been thinking and had time to go out and get myself a brandy barrel stout.
Fair enough.
You know, because Joachim likes his brandy.
He does. Oh no, he doesn't anymore. He liked.
He liked his brandy.
Past tense. Important.
Oh man. But yeah, I think that brings us to the end of our episode.
Yep.
This has been episode 51 of the
51
Inking
episodes.
Out Loud podcast. Next up, we are going to be heading into Winter's Heart, book 9 of the Wheel of Time. We are going to be doing a little more than half. We're going to read through the end of chapter 18 and Offer.
Okay.
And, you know, in the meantime, if you appreciate what we're doing with this, you want to help support the podcast, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/inkingoutloud, where we've got a bunch of benefits for our supporters there. You can get access to episodes early. We are now releasing monthly short fiction or excerpts from our novels for all of you guys to read. We got a bunch of other stuff there, so check that out. As always, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey, and with me is my co-host, Rob Santos.
Heyo.
And we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.